King Vorka sat on his massive throne, a cruel smile on his face. The Xendar Dominion had ruled the galaxy for centuries, crushing every weaker race that stood in its way. To him, war was not a challenge, it was a routine. Conquer, rule, move forward. That was the way of the Xendar. His throne room was decorated with banners from fallen civilizations. Each flag represented a species that once thought they could resist the might of the Dominion. Now, they served as reminders that resistance was useless. Standing before him was his war general, Zortak, a towering figure with armor covered in battle scars. Zortak had seen countless battles, but today he hesitated before speaking. "My king," he said, lowering his head, "we have encountered a new species. They call themselves humans." Vorka laughed. It was a deep, booming sound that echoed across the hall. "Humans," he repeated, as if the word itself was a joke. "What do they look like?" "They are small, weak compared to us," Zortak answered. "They lack natural weapons, no claws, no fangs. Their bodies are fragile. Their world, called Earth, is rich with resources, but they have no real power to protect it." The king leaned forward, amused. "So, they are nothing more than insects waiting to be crushed." Zortak hesitated again. "That is what I thought, my king. But there is something unusual about them." Vorka's smile faded. He did not like uncertainty. "Explain." The general cleared his throat. "Other species, when they learn of the Dominion, they surrender. They beg for mercy. But the humans, they do not fear us." The king's eyes narrowed. "They should." Zortak nodded. "Yes, my king. But instead of surrendering, they are preparing. They are studying our movements. They are testing their weapons against our scouts. They fight back, even when outnumbered." Vorka leaned back and chuckled. "Foolish creatures. They do not understand their place. It seems I must teach them a lesson." The king waved his hand, and a massive holographic screen lit up. It displayed the latest reports on humanity. Small ships, outdated technology, and no intergalactic empire to support them. The humans were alone. "This will be easy," Vorka said. "Send a warning. Tell them they have one chance to surrender and join the Dominion. If they refuse, we will destroy them." Zortak bowed. "As you command, my king." As the general left the throne room, Vorka laughed again. Another weak race thinking they could stand against him. He had seen it all before. He had never lost. And he would not lose now. Or so he thought. The message from the Xendar Dominion arrived on Earth like a dark cloud before a storm. A massive holographic projection of King Vorka appeared over the major cities, his deep voice echoing across the land. "Humans," he declared, "you stand before the might of the Xendar Dominion. We offer you one chance. Surrender now, and you will be allowed to serve under our rule. Refuse, and your world will burn." The people of Earth watched in silence. Some felt fear, some felt anger, but no one spoke of surrender. In a hidden military base, world leaders and top strategists gathered. A large screen showed images of Xendar warships, towering warriors, and advanced technology. The enemy was powerful, there was no doubt. An older General Gray looked around the room. His voice was calm but firm. "We have seen what the Xendar do to other planets. If we surrender, we lose everything. If we fight, we still have a chance." A scientist named Dr. Lee adjusted her glasses. "But how? Their technology is far ahead of ours. Their soldiers are bigger, stronger. A direct battle will be suicide." A younger strategist, Daniel, leaned forward. "Then we don't fight them directly." All eyes turned to him. The Xendar are used to enemies who give up or fight like them. But we are human. We don't play by their rules. Gray nodded. "Go on." Daniel pointed to the screen. "They think we are weak because we are smaller. But humans are fast, adaptable. We can use the environment, set traps, hit and run. If we fight smart, we can make them regret underestimating us." The leaders exchanged looks. Then, slowly, they nodded. And so, humanity's response to Vorka's message was not surrender. It was silence. Days passed. The Xendar Dominion waited for an answer, but Earth did not respond. No surrender, no attack, just nothing. On the Xendar flagship, Vorka sat on his throne, his patience running thin. Where is their response? Zortak hesitated. "They have not answered, my king." The king scowled. "They are afraid. We do not know that." Vorka's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting they are planning something?" Zortak took a deep breath. "I do not know, my king, but they are not acting like the others." Vorka stood, his voice filled with confidence. "It does not matter. They are weak. If they will not surrender, we will take their planet by force." The Xendar fleet moved toward Earth, expecting an easy conquest. But what awaited them was something no species had ever done before. Humanity was not running. They were waiting. And they had a plan. The Xendar warships arrived in Earth's orbit like a dark shadow, blocking out the stars. The fleet was massive, rows of towering battle cruisers, each one powerful enough to destroy entire cities. King Vorka watched from his flagship, confident that this would be another quick victory. On Earth, the people did not panic. They did not beg for mercy. Instead, they prepared. As the first Xendar landing pods descended, military forces across the planet activated their defense systems. Soldiers moved into position. Scientists monitored enemy movements. Engineers worked on last-minute traps. The entire planet had become a battlefield before the first shot was even fired. Vorka's voice echoed across the command center of his flagship. "Begin the invasion." The first wave of Xendar warriors landed in the outskirts of human cities. They were tall, armored, and stronger than any human. Their weapons could cut through steel, and their shields could withstand heavy fire. The Xendar had won countless battles before. They had no reason to believe today would be different. But today was different. The moment the first warriors stepped onto human soil, they faced something unexpected: silence. There were no soldiers waiting for them in the open, no grand battle formations. The streets were empty. The cities seemed abandoned. Then, without warning, the attack began. From hidden positions, human snipers took precise shots, targeting weak points in Xendar armor. Explosives planted under roads detonated, sending enemy squads flying. Small drones, repurposed from civilian technology, swarmed the invaders, disrupting their communication systems. The Xendar warriors were trained for direct combat. But this was something else. A squad of Xendar soldiers marched into a narrow street, scanning for enemies. Suddenly, steel gates slammed shut behind them. Before they could react, fire rained down from above. Humans had turned rooftops into defensive positions. The trapped warriors fought back, but the humans were too fast, too coordinated. Within minutes, the entire squad was defeated. Reports flooded into Vorka's command center. "My king, we are facing heavy resistance." Vorka frowned. "How? Their weapons are weak." Zortak, watching the battle from the flagship, shook his head. "Their weapons may be weaker, but their minds are sharp. They fight in ways we do not expect." Vorka growled, then crushed them with brute force. But brute force was exactly what the humans had prepared for. Every time the Xendar tried to take control of a city, humans cut off their supply lines. Whenever the Xendar moved forward, human ambushes slowed them down. The longer the battle lasted, the more the humans adapted. They changed tactics, used new strategies, and learned from every skirmish. A Xendar officer, exhausted and frustrated, sent a desperate message to the flagship. "My king, these humans, they do not break." Vorka's hands clenched into fists. This was supposed to be an easy victory, but for the first time, the great Xendar Dominion was struggling. And the battle for Earth had only just begun. Kane Vorka paced inside his flagship's command center, his golden armor glinting under the dim red lights. Reports from the battlefield filled the air, static-filled voices of his commanders, the sounds of explosions, and the occasional cry of a fallen warrior. The mighty Xendar Dominion was struggling against a species that should have been crushed within days. It made no sense. A holographic map of Earth flickered before him. Red marks indicated Xendar-controlled areas. Blue marks represented human resistance. And to Vorka's frustration, the blue marks were growing. Zortak, his war general, stood nearby, his expression grim. "My king, the humans are adapting too fast." Vorka turned sharply. "Explain." Zortak gestured toward the map. "In the beginning, our soldiers had the advantage. We pushed into their cities, destroyed their defenses, and forced them to retreat." He tapped the screen, zooming in on a region where Xendar forces had suffered heavy losses. But within days, their tactics changed. They studied our movements, found our weaknesses, and adjusted their attacks. Vorka growled. "They are weak. They should not be able to do this." Zortak nodded. "Yes, my king, but weakness is not what I see." He pulled up new footage, a battle in the ruined streets of a human city. Xendar soldiers moved forward, their armor deflecting bullets, their energy shields absorbing explosions. Victory seemed certain. Then suddenly, the buildings around them collapsed. Humans had set traps, luring the Xendar forces into a kill zone. Hidden snipers fired from the rubble, picking off warriors with precise shots. Small drones, carrying explosives, crashed into Xendar battle tanks, disabling them one by one. The screen flickered again, showing a different battle. A squad of Xendar soldiers moved cautiously through a jungle, scanning for enemies. They had fought here before, and had learned how humans attacked from the trees. But this time, the humans did something unexpected. They had moved underground. The ground beneath the Xendar warriors exploded. Hidden tunnels had been dug beneath the battlefield, allowing humans to strike from below. Before the warriors could react, the jungle was filled with fire and smoke. Vorka's fists tightened. "They are learning." Zortak exhaled. "Yes, my king. Faster than any species we have ever faced." Vorka slammed his fist against the command table, his voice filled with anger. "Enough. Deploy more troops. Increase firepower. Burn their cities if you must. We will not lose to these creatures." Zortak hesitated. "My king, it is not just their soldiers. Their scientists are also working at an alarming speed." He brought up another screen. Images appeared, human scientists analyzing captured Xendar weapons, taking them apart, studying their energy cores. Then the next image showed something even more shocking. Humans using Xendar technology. "They are reverse engineering our weapons," Zortak continued. "They do not just fight. They steal knowledge. They turn our strengths against us." For the first time, Kane Vorka felt something unusual deep inside him. Not anger, not arrogance. Something he had never felt before. A small, cold seed of doubt. Kane Vorka sat in silence, staring at the holographic screens before him. The battlefield reports were getting worse. His mighty Xendar warriors, known across the galaxy for their strength, were struggling against these so-called weaklings. It was not just that humans were fighting back. It was how they were fighting. On the screen, a Xendar assault team advanced through a destroyed city, their heavy armor glowing under the flickering lights. Their plasma weapons could melt through steel, and their shields could withstand a full missile strike. Against any other species, they would have been unstoppable. But against humans, power alone was not enough. From the rooftops, silent figures watched. Not soldiers in traditional battle armor, but fighters wearing lightweight suits, blending into the darkness. They were not aiming for direct confrontation. Instead, they waited, studying movements, memorizing patrol routes, listening to enemy communication signals. Then, at the right moment, the humans struck. Explosives planted beneath the streets detonated, causing parts of the road to collapse. Xendar soldiers fell into deep craters, their formations breaking apart. Before they could regroup, the humans moved in, using speed and precision instead of brute force. A commander's voice crackled through the Xendar flagship. "We are under attack." They knew our position before we arrived. Static. The transmission cut off. Vorka clenched his fists. His elite soldiers had been hunted like prey. He turned toward Zortak, who stood stiffly beside him. "Explain this." Zortak exhaled. "They have learned, my king. Not just our weapons, not just our technology, but us. They study our behavior. They predict our movements. And they set traps before we even arrive." The king's jaw tightened. "They are smaller. They are weaker. Their technology is behind ours." Zortak hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "Yes, my king, but they have something no other species has." Vorka's eyes narrowed. "What?" Zortak took a deep breath. Ingenuity. He pulled up new footage. Humans were no longer just fighting with their old weapons. They were modifying them. An energy rifle, originally designed for Xendar warriors, had been reshaped, its power core adjusted, its targeting system improved. Another image showed a human tank, its plating reinforced with salvaged Xendar armor. Plasma shields, once exclusive to the Dominion, were now being used by human battle squads. "They do not just steal technology," Zortak continued. "They improve it. They adapt faster than we ever imagined." For the first time in his long rule, King Vorka felt something that had never touched his heart before: doubt. But he crushed the feeling immediately. He was the ruler of the Xendar Dominion. He had never lost a war, and he would not lose now. Slamming his fist onto the command table, he growled, "Then we will stop them before they adapt further. Prepare for a full-scale planetary assault. No more traps. No more games. We will erase this species from history." Zortak lowered his head. "As you command, my king." But deep inside, the war general knew something that Vorka refused to accept. This war was no longer about strength. It was about something far more dangerous. And the humans, they were winning. The Xendar fleet hovered over Earth like a massive storm cloud, their warships blocking out the sun. King Vorka stood in the command center of his flagship, his eyes burning with determination. He had underestimated humanity, but now he would end this war in one decisive strike. "All forces," he commanded, his voice echoing across the fleet, "attack with full power. No mercy. Burn their cities. Crush their resistance." The invasion began. Thousands of Xendar dropships descended, flooding the skies like a swarm of metal locusts. Xendar warriors marched through the ruined streets, their plasma rifles glowing with deadly energy. Battle tanks rolled forward, their massive cannons blasting apart human defenses. This was the full might of the Xendar Dominion. No species had ever survived such an assault. But the humans, they did not run. They did not surrender. They fought harder than ever before. Inside a hidden underground base, General Gray watched the battle unfold on large screens. His expression was calm, but his mind was racing. The Xendar had finally committed their full forces. That meant only one thing. This was their chance. He turned to his team of strategists. "Are the countermeasures ready?" A scientist named Dr. Lee nodded. "Yes, General. We have successfully reprogrammed their captured drones. They are now under our control." Gray's lips curled into a small smile. "Then it's time to show the Xendar that brute force is not enough to win a war." He picked up a radio and gave the command. "All units, activate Phase 2. Across the battlefield, something changed. Xendar troops who had been pushing forward suddenly found their communications disrupted. Their helmets filled with static. Their commanders' voices disappeared. Orders became impossible to receive. Then, Xendar war machines, tanks, drones, automated turrets began turning against them. Plasma cannons, once aimed at human forces, now fired upon their own troops. Air support ships, confused by the electronic interference, crashed into each other in fiery explosions. The mighty Xendar army, once unstoppable, was now in chaos. King Vorka watched in horror from his flagship. "What is happening?" A trembling officer replied, "My king, the humans have hijacked our systems. They are using our own technology against us." Vorka's hands clenched into fists. "Impossible. No primitive race can." Before he could finish his sentence, an explosion rocked the flagship. Warning alarms blared, red lights flashing across the control room. A new report came in. "My king, the humans have launched an attack on our fleet. They are targeting our command ships." Vorka's rage burned hotter than ever. "No, we will not fall to these insects." But even as he spoke, deep inside, he felt something cold creeping into his heart. Fear. Because for the first time in his life, he was losing. King Vorka gripped the edges of his command table, his claws digging into the metal. The battlefield was turning against him. The mighty Xendar army, feared across the stars, was now in chaos. Their own machines had turned against them. Their communication systems were failing. Their forces, once so confident, were breaking apart. How? No species had ever resisted the dominion like this. No species had ever fought back like this. His war general, Zortak, stood nearby, his face filled with unease. "My king, we must pull back and regroup. The humans have compromised our systems. Our fleets are no longer safe." Vorka slammed his fist on the table. "No, we do not retreat. We are the Xendar. We are superior. We do not lose to weaker creatures." Zortak hesitated. His king's rage was blinding him, but the truth was clear. This war was slipping out of their hands. Suddenly, a new alarm rang out. A panicked officer shouted, "My king, the humans have launched a direct attack on our flagship." Vorka's eyes widened. "What?" A screen flickered to life, showing a squadron of human fighter jets weaving through Xendar defenses. They were smaller than Xendar ships, slower, with weaker weapons, but they moved differently. Unlike the rigid formations of the Xendar fleets, these human pilots flew unpredictably, dodging plasma fire, taking impossible turns, using speed and agility instead of brute force. They were aiming directly for the command ship. "They are trying to cut off the head of the invasion," Zortak muttered. Vorka clenched his fists. "They will fail." But deep inside, he was not so sure anymore. On the battlefield below, General Gray watched the sky as the human fighters closed in on the Xendar flagship. He picked up his radio. "This is it," he said. "All forces, focus fire on the command ship. We take out their leader, and this war is over." Across the ruined cities, human forces redirected their attacks. Anti-air turrets fired into the sky. Captured Xendar drones, now controlled by human engineers, turned their weapons on their former masters. Missiles launched from hidden bases, streaking toward the massive ship in orbit. Inside the flagship, alarms blared. A voice called out, "Shields failing. Hull integrity at 60%. No, 45%. Vorka's heart pounded. This was not how it was supposed to happen. He had never lost a war. He had never even considered the possibility of losing. And yet now, the impossible was happening. Zortak turned to him, his voice quiet but firm. "My king, we must retreat. If we stay, we will lose everything." Vorka wanted to refuse. He wanted to fight to the last moment. But the truth was undeniable now. He had laughed at the humans. He had called them weak. But he had been the fool. And now he had to make a choice, stay and die, or retreat and survive. With a heavy heart, he growled, "Order the retreat." Zortak bowed his head. "Yes, my king." Across the battlefield, the mighty Xendar warships turned away from Earth, retreating into space. And for the first time in history, humanity had won. The Xendar fleet vanished into the darkness of space, their once mighty invasion reduced to nothing but burning wreckage in Earth's orbit. The sky, which had been filled with warships and fire, was now quiet. On the ground, the battlefield was silent. Smoke still rose from destroyed buildings, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. But there was no more fighting. No more plasma blasts. No more war cries from the Xender soldiers. It was over. Humanity had won. General Gray stood on a rooftop, looking over the ruined city. His uniform was covered in dust and dirt, his face lined with exhaustion. Around him, soldiers and civilians emerged from underground shelters, staring at the sky in disbelief. They had survived. A young soldier, barely out of training, approached him. His voice shook with emotion. "Sir, is it really over?" Gray let out a slow breath. "Yes, the Xendar are gone." The soldier's eyes widened. We beat them." Gray nodded. "Yes." For a long moment, the soldier just stood there. Then, without warning, he laughed, a short, breathless laugh of relief. Others around them started to cheer. Some hugged each other, some cried, and some simply sat down, overwhelmed by what had just happened. They had fought against an enemy stronger, more advanced, and more powerful than them. And they had won. Not because of superior weapons, not because of sheer strength, but because they had adapted, because they had refused to surrender, because they were human. Meanwhile, far away, aboard the Xender command ship, King Vorka sat in silence. He had never known defeat before. He had always believed in the superiority of the Xender dominion. Strength ruled the universe, and the weak were meant to fall. But humanity had proven him wrong. They had been weaker, but they had fought smarter. They had been outmatched, but they had changed faster. They had taken everything the Xender threw at them and turned it into a weapon. Vorka's golden armor, once a symbol of victory, now felt heavy on his shoulders. Zortak, his war general, stood beside him. He did not speak, but his expression said everything. The king had failed. The Xendar dominion would not collapse. His empire was still vast, still powerful. But the humiliation of this defeat would spread. Other species, once too afraid to resist, might begin to wonder, if humans could fight back, why couldn't they? This war was over, but its consequences had just begun. For the first time in his life, King Vorka felt something he had never felt before. Fear. Not fear of humans alone, but fear of what they represented. Because if such a small, young species could defeat the Xender, what else were they capable of? The world had changed. The Xender invasion was over, but Earth was not the same planet it had been before the war. The cities lay in ruins, the sky still carried the smoke of battle, and the scars of war would take years to heal. But humanity had survived. And more than that, they had won. General Gray stood on the remains of what had once been a grand government building, now reduced to rubble. From here, he could see survivors working together, soldiers helping civilians, engineers rebuilding power grids, doctors treating the wounded. Humanity was already adapting, just as they had during the war. Dr. Lee approached him, holding a tablet with new reports. Reconstruction efforts are underway. It will take time, but we're making progress. Gray nodded, and the captured Xendar technology. Lee smiled. Our scientists are learning fast. We've already modified some of their plasma shields for civilian protection. If we keep going at this rate, in a few years, we might be as advanced as they are. Gray looked at the sky, where broken Xender ships still floated in orbit. Not just as advanced, he muttered. More advanced. Because if there was one thing the war had proven, it was that humanity didn't just survive. They evolved. Far away, on the Xender homeworld, King Vorka sat in his war chamber, deep in thought. The hall was silent, his advisors too afraid to speak. His defeat on Earth had shaken the entire dominion. No one had ever imagined that humans, a species no one had even considered a threat, would fight back so fiercely. They had not been stronger. They had not been more powerful, but they had been smarter. They had taken Xender weapons, studied them, improved them. They had adapted faster than any species that Xender had ever faced. And now, Vorka realized something chilling. They would not stop here. Humanity had tasted victory. They had seen their own strength, and if given time, they would grow. They would surpass the Xender. Zortak stepped forward, his voice hesitant. "My king, what do we do now?" Vorka's claws tightened around his throne. For the first time in his life, he did not know the answer. All his life, he had believed that the strong ruled the weak. But humanity had rewritten the rules. And now, the Xender Dominion was no longer the strongest force in the universe. Back on Earth, the first spaceship built with Xender technology was ready for launch. Its name, painted proudly on the side, was Hope. Humanity had defended their home. Now, they were ready for the next step. They were going to the stars. Not to conquer, not to invade, but to explore, to learn, to grow, and, if necessary, to remind the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted off into the sky. A new era had begun. The end.